You know, there was a time in my life when I couldn't figure it out. I'd walk into a room and it's like I was invisible. People didn't listen when I spoke. They'd talk right over me. They'd nod and smile, but I knew deep down I didn't have their respect. And it hurt, it really did. Because nobody wants to be the person folks overlook. Nobody wants to feel like what they say don't carry no weight. And I sat there one night, broke, tired, frustrated, and I asked myself, why do some people get respect without begging for it? And why do some people never get it no matter how hard they try? And that question right there, that question changed my whole life because I found out respect is not some fancy suit you buy. It's not your car. It's not your job title. Respect is psychology. It's tiny shifts in how you see yourself and how you show up for the world. Once I learned these little secrets, man, I started watching people stand up straighter when I came around. I'd say something and they'd lean in. Folks started calling me sir who'd never even looked my way before. I'm telling you, it ain't magic. It's just knowing how people work. And when you know how people work, you know how to work people. Not in a shady way, but in a way that earns you what you deserve. These 5 secrets I'm about to share with you, they flipped the script for me. They took me from feeling invisible to feeling like my presence means something. And I promise you this, if you listen close, if you hold on to these secrets and use them every day, you'll walk different, talk different, live different. Folks will see you different. This right here, this changed my life. And I swear to you, if you let it, it'll change yours too. You know, I think one of the biggest shocks you ever get in life is when you wake up to the fact that nobody owes you respect. And I mean nobody. You grow up thinking, maybe if I'm nice, if I'm polite, if I do what I'm told, people will respect me. You think your family's going to respect you because you're family. You think your friends got your back because you're friends. You think your boss or your co-workers or your neighbors or whoever you meet is going to give you that basic respect just because you exist. But that's not how it works, not really. Maybe they'll give you a little courtesy. They might smile and shake your hand and say the right words, but true respect, the kind that makes folks stop and listen when you talk, the kind that makes them think twice before crossing you, the kind that makes them trust you and follow you, that ain't free. That's earned, and you got to earn it every single day. I remember when this really hit me for the first time. I was young, working this dead-end job, clocking in and out, thinking that if I just kept my head down and did my work, people would notice. They didn't. I'd watch these other folks. Some of them weren't even that good at the job, but they'd walk in like they owned the place, speak up in meetings, carry themselves like they deserved every bit of attention in the room, and they got it. The boss would ask their opinion. They'd get promotions. People would laugh at their jokes, even if they weren't that funny. And I'd be sitting there wondering, what's wrong with me? Why can't they see me like that? One day, I got tired of that feeling, tired of waiting for somebody to hand me what I thought I deserved. So I started paying attention. I'd watch how these folks talked, how they moved, how they handled themselves. I'd watch how they'd look people in the eye, how they'd speak with certainty, even if they didn't have all the answers. And slowly, I realized respect is like a mirror. People reflect back to you what you show them. If you walk in acting like you don't matter, they believe you. If you talk like you got nothing worth hearing, they believe you. If you carry yourself like you're waiting for permission to be important, they're never going to give it to you. So I made a decision. I decided to stop acting like respect was something other folks had to give me out of pity or politeness. I decided I was going to earn it every single day. And let me tell you something, when you flip that switch in your mind, the world starts looking different. You realize every day you got a chance to build a reputation or break it down. You realize you don't get to slack off one day and expect folks to remember how sharp you were yesterday. You got to show up. And showing up doesn't mean you got to be the loudest or the smartest person in the room. It means you got to stand for something. It means you got to have a backbone when it matters. It means your words match your actions, even when it costs you. I remember this one time I had to stand up to a guy at work who'd been running his mouth, talking down to everybody like we were beneath him. Now, the old me would have let it slide, kept my head down, avoided the drama. But I'd learned by then that letting people disrespect you once is like opening a door you'll never close again. So I pulled him aside, looked him right in the eye, and told him straight up, "Look, I respect you, but you ain't going to talk to me like that. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever." I was nervous. My hands were sweating, but I meant every word. And from that day forward, he never spoke to me sideways again. And you know what? Other folks saw that too. They saw I wasn't the kind of man to get stepped on, and they treated me different because of it. That's the thing about respect. It's not loud, but it's clear. People can feel it when you respect yourself. They can feel it when you take yourself seriously. They can feel it when you set a standard for how you let them treat you. And they test you too. Oh, they'll test you every chance they get, just to see if you really mean it. That's why you got to earn it daily. It's not about picking fights or walking around like you're better than anybody. It's about carrying yourself in a way that says, I know who I am. I know what I stand for. And I ain't afraid to lose people who don't see my worth. So if you're sitting there wondering why folks don't respect you the way you wish they did, I want you to ask yourself, how do you carry yourself? Do you shrink your voice? Do you say yes when you want to say no? Do you let little disrespect slide because it's awkward to stand up? Do you let folks cross your line because you're scared they'll get mad or walk away? I'm telling you, they might get mad. They might walk away. But the ones who stay, they'll know exactly who they're dealing with. And the world will treat you the way you demand to be treated. Not by shouting, but by showing day after day that you mean what you say and you say what you mean. I learned this the hard way, but I'm grateful for it. Because once you realize respect ain't automatic, once you see it's something you build brick by brick, moment by moment, choice by choice, you stop waiting for the world to hand you what you deserve. You go out there and earn it like your name depends on it. Because it does. It's funny how people think you got to make these big, dramatic moves to change your life. Folks think they need a new car, a new job, a whole new wardrobe, a fancy title on their business card before people start treating them different. But I'll tell you something I learned the long way. It ain't the big flashy things that flip how people see you. It's the small, quiet shifts up here in your mind that do all the heavy lifting. Little psychological switches that once you flip them, people can feel it before you even open your mouth. I didn't always know this. I used to think confidence was something you had to be born with. I thought charisma was something only special people had, like some kind of magic trick they'd been taught when nobody else was looking. I'd watch people light up a room with just a smile, watch folks lean in when they talked, hang on every word, and I'd wonder, what do they got that I don't? And I'll never forget this one night. I was sitting alone, beat down by another day of feeling overlooked. I'd done good work that week, real good work, but nobody noticed. Nobody said thank you. Nobody asked my opinion. And I thought, what's the point of all this if nobody sees me anyway? But that night, something different happened. Instead of feeling sorry for myself, I got mad enough to ask a better question. What am I doing that makes it so easy for people to overlook me? I started reading, listening, studying people who knew how to command a room without shouting for it. And what I found out hit me like a brick. It was never about being the loudest. It wasn't about being the biggest, the flashiest, the richest person in the room. It was about tiny cues, subtle signals that tell people how to feel about you without you saying a word. And it's all psychology. I learned about eye contact. Simple, right? But you'd be surprised how many people can't hold a gaze. They'll look down, they'll fidget, they'll stare at the floor while they're talking like they're apologizing for existing. I used to do it too. But then I learned that when you look somebody in the eye, you tell them you believe what you're saying. You tell them you're not afraid of them. You tell them you got nothing to hide. Then there's posture. Nobody teaches you this stuff when you're growing up. They'll tell you to sit up straight because it's polite, but they don't tell you what it does to people's minds. When you stand tall, when your shoulders are back, when your chin's up, you look like you got nothing to run from. You look like you got somewhere to be and you belong there. And people read that in a split second. I started practicing it. Even when I felt small inside, I'd stand like I owned the ground I was standing on. I'd walk into a meeting like I was welcome there, even if my insides were screaming otherwise. And the wildest thing happened. People treated me like I belonged there too. Voice is another one. Now, I ain't saying you gotta boom your voice like you're on stage all the time. But I learned the power of pausing, the power of speaking just a little slower than you want to. When you talk too fast, it tells people you're nervous, you're rushing, you don't want them to stop and think about what you're saying. But when you slow down, when you let silence do some of the work for you, people lean in. They catch the weight in your words. They respect the space you hold. One of my favorite shifts, though, was learning how to say no without feeling like I had to apologize for it. That was huge for me. I used to say yes to everything. Extra shifts, extra favors, extra work that nobody else wanted to do. I thought people would respect me for being helpful, for being the reliable one. And maybe they did a little, but not in the way that counts. They respected what they could get from me, but they didn't respect me. Then one day I read this line that punched me in the gut. People treat your time the way you treat your time. So I tried it out. Next time somebody dumped something on my plate that wasn't mine to carry, I took a breath, felt my heartbeat in my throat, and said, I can't take that on right now. No long excuses. No sorry speech. Just no. You'd be amazed how fast folks adjust when you draw a line. I thought they'd be mad. Some were for a minute. But they found someone else to push. They realized I wasn't the easy option anymore. And the ones who stuck around, they respected the fact that I respected myself enough to protect my time. All these little shifts, eye contact, posture, pacing your voice, protecting your time, they ain't big fireworks. Nobody throws you a party for doing them, but they add up. They change how you feel about you. And when you change how you feel about you, the world can't help but feel it too. That's the secret. The mind is where it starts. Once you learn to flip those little switches in your own head, you don't have to beg people to see you. They just do. And when they do, you start walking through life a whole different way. I think everybody has that one moment in their life when they catch a glimpse of who they could be if they stopped playing small. Mine didn't come with fireworks or some big, dramatic scene. It came quiet, on a regular day that looked like any other day. But what happened in that moment opened my eyes so wide I couldn't go back to who I was before. I still remember it like it happened 5 minutes ago. I was sitting in this cramped little meeting room at my job. The kind with that stale coffee smell, dry erase markers that never work right, and that one flickering ceiling light that buzzes just enough to make you wish you'd called in sick. It was one of those meetings where everybody half listens, half checks their phones, and I'd gotten real good at blending into the background during those. That was my comfort zone, invisible. Show up, not along, keep my head down, get out. But that day was different because for the first time in my life, I decided to try something new. I'd been reading about these small ways you can shift how people see you. Not by acting fake, but by changing how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you look people in the eye. I figured it couldn't hurt to test it out. So I sat a little straighter than usual. I didn't hunch over my notepad like I was hiding behind it. When someone looked at me, I held their gaze instead of darting away like I always did. When it came time for everyone to share ideas, I told myself I wouldn't second guess what I was about to say. Normally, I'd rehearse it 100 times in my head, talk myself out of it, then tell myself I'd speak up next time. But this time, I raised my hand before my fear could get its claws in me. I felt my heart banging against my ribs so hard I thought everyone could hear it, but I kept my face calm. When I started talking, I did something I'd never done before. I didn't rush. I didn't throw 50 disclaimers on my idea. I didn't say, well, maybe this is stupid, but I just said it. Clear, steady. I remember the manager turned his head so fast it surprised me. Folks around the table actually looked up from their screens. One guy who always talked over me went quiet. That tiny moment was the first time I felt that shift. That first taste of what it feels like when people actually stop and hear you. I'll tell you what hit me the hardest about that moment. It wasn't that my idea was some stroke of genius. It wasn't. It was decent. What made people tune in wasn't the idea itself. It was how I brought it into the room. I showed up like I expected to be heard, and people felt that before they even processed what I was saying. I'd been waiting my whole life for folks to give me permission to matter. Turns out, they were just waiting for me to show them I believed I did. After that day, I started testing it in other places too. At the coffee shop, I'd stand tall in line instead of folding my arms like I wanted to disappear. At family gatherings, I'd speak my mind without trying to wrap my words in soft padding so nobody got uncomfortable. I'd look people in the eye when I told them no. Not rude, not cold, just certain. And every time I did, I'd see that flicker in their eyes, that tiny moment when they realized I wasn't the same old version of myself they were used to. One time, I was at this dinner with a bunch of people I barely knew. The old me would have sat there smiling politely, waiting for someone to drag me into the conversation. But that night, I leaned in, asked questions, told my stories without worrying if they were good enough. And the wildest thing happened. People responded. They laughed when I laughed. They nodded. They asked me for my opinion on things I didn't even know I had an opinion on. And when I left that night, somebody who'd barely looked my way before called out, "Hey, let's grab lunch sometime." Moments like that sneak up on you. They don't feel huge while they're happening, but you notice this small spark in your gut, a feeling that maybe you're not invisible after all. Maybe you've been wearing your invisibility like an old coat that doesn't fit anymore. And when you shrug it off, folks see you standing there and think, where's this person been hiding? I'd be lying if I said I never slip back into my old ways. Some days I still catch myself shrinking when I should stand tall, biting my tongue when I know I should speak. But now I know what it feels like when I don't. I know what it feels like when people respond to me different. When they straighten up a bit, when they look me in the eye a little longer, when they repeat my name to make sure they remember it. That feeling is like oxygen for your self-worth. The biggest lesson for me is that you don't have to change who you are to get that reaction. You don't have to turn yourself into a showman or fake some bigger personality. You just have to change how you carry who you already are. Small shifts. Straighten your back, lift your chin, hold your words like they matter, because they do. Look folks in the eye like you're not asking for permission to exist. And bit by bit, you watch the world adjust around you. I wish someone had told me sooner that one day you wake up and realize respect doesn't show up when you're finally perfect. It shows up when you decide you're done asking for permission to be here. Once you taste that even once, you never really go back. You just keep showing up one moment at a time. And you let the world see the part of you that finally stepped out of the corner and claimed your seat at the table. I think if I laid out every moment in my life where I felt like I didn't matter, we'd be here all day. There's something about being overlooked that sticks to your bones if you don't figure out how to shake it off. And for the longest time, I didn't know how. I just figured some folks were born to stand out, and the rest of us were born to clap for them from the back row. I thought maybe I wasn't interesting enough or bold enough or loud enough to get people to notice me. So I played small. I stayed out of the way. I told myself it was easier that way, but the truth is it hurt every single time I felt invisible. There was one year in particular that nearly broke me. I was working at this company where I was just one more name on the schedule. I'd come in early, stay late, do extra work nobody wanted to do. I'd say yes when I really wanted to say no. I'd keep my head down and stay in my lane because I thought that's what good people did. That's what I'd been taught. Work hard, be humble, don't cause trouble, and people will treat you right. But life doesn't hand out medals just because you follow the rules. One day, they were handing out some recognition awards at this big company meeting. I watched as they called up the same names I'd heard a dozen times before. Folks who knew how to make themselves seen. Folks who knew how to speak up Even when they didn't have the best ideas in the room, I just sat there clapping, feeling that tight knot in my chest that said, when's it going to be your turn? But deep down, I already knew it wasn't coming. Not like that. That night I went home and sat in my car in the driveway for almost an hour. I didn't even turn the engine off, just sat there in the glow of the streetlight, hands on the steering wheel, staring out the windshield like I'd find an answer out there somewhere in the dark. I was tired of feeling small, tired of feeling like a ghost in my own life. And for the first time, I asked myself something different. What if it's not them? What if it's you? That question stung. Nobody likes to admit they might be the reason they're stuck. But I knew it was true. Nobody was coming to rescue me from the corner I'd backed myself into. So the next morning, I did something that scared the hell out of me. I walked into work and I decided to test out something I'd read about. It was a tiny thing, just how you stand when you walk in the room. I'd read somewhere that if you walk into a room like you belong there, people start to believe it before you even say a word. So I squared my shoulders. I lifted my head. I made eye contact instead of staring at the floor. My heart was pounding, but I kept thinking, act like you belong here until you believe it. The first few days, nobody said anything, but I noticed folks looking at me a little longer. They didn't just breeze past me in the hallway. One of my coworkers asked if I wanted to join their lunch table, something they'd never done before. It sounds small, but when you're used to eating alone in your car, that's something. After that, I started speaking up more in meetings, nothing earth-shattering, just voicing my thoughts without apologizing for them. Before, I'd sit there second, guessing every word in my head until the moment passed and somebody else said what I was thinking. This time I leaned in. I talked slower. I didn't fill the silence with nervous chatter. And one day, my manager turned to me in front of everyone and said, "That's a good point. What do you think we should do?" I can't even tell you how big that felt to me. Just a handful of words, but it was proof. Proof that when you shift how you show up, people shift how they respond to you. That was the turning point for me. It didn't make me perfect overnight. I still slipped back into old habits sometimes. There were days I still felt that old ghost of invisibility trying to drag me back to the corner. But once you get a taste of what it feels like to be seen, you can't unknow it. I took that feeling and carried it with me everywhere, not just at work, but in my family too. I started saying no when I meant no. I stopped explaining myself to people who didn't deserve an explanation. I started listening more and talking less, but when I did talk, I made it count. I noticed that when I held myself with just a little more self-respect, people gave it back to me without me having to beg for it. One day, I was standing in line at the store, and the person behind me asked for my opinion on something random. Just a little thing, but I realized that before, nobody even noticed I was standing there. Now it seemed like people felt my presence. It was like the world shifted a few inches to make room for me, because I finally decided I was worth the space I was standing in. I wish I could go back to that tired version of me sitting in the car that night and tell them, it's going to change, but you got to change first. Not in a fake way, not by becoming someone you're not, but by stepping into who you really are underneath all that doubt and fear. By deciding you're done being the quiet afterthought. I learned the hard way that respect is quiet at first. It starts in your bones before it shows up in the room. And once you feel it, really feel it, you carry yourself different. And the world can't help but respond to that. I know because I've lived it. I know because I used to be invisible. And I know because I'm not anymore. If there's one thing I wish I could reach through and tell every person who ever sat alone wondering if they'll ever be taken seriously, it's this. None of this is out of your reach. I don't care where you came from, how quiet you've been, how many times you've been overlooked, how many people told you to stay in your lane. None of that has to be the final word on you. These little secrets, these tiny shifts that change how people see you, they are not locked up for the chosen few. They are not a rich man's trick or some fancy education you have to buy. They're for anybody willing to stand up and say, all right, I'm ready to be seen now. See, I didn't grow up in some big house with connections. I didn't have anyone whispering the rules of how to carry myself in my ear. Nobody pulled me aside and said, hey, here's how you get people to listen when you talk. I learned most of this the hard way. By falling flat on my face, by watching people who got it right, by picking up scraps of wisdom wherever I could find them. And when I figured out that respect doesn't show up because you shout for it, but because you signal it, that's when my whole life shifted. I've met people from every walk of life you can think of, folks who mop floors, folks who run companies, folks who stand behind counters all day, and folks who stand on stages. And you know what I've seen? The ones who get respect are not always the loudest or the biggest or the smartest. They're the ones who decided they deserved it first. They're the ones who carry themselves like they got a reason to stand tall. That's not something you're born with. That's something you build one small piece at a time. Maybe you've spent your life thinking you're not the type. Maybe you're the shy one, the quiet one, the one who sits at the edge of the group photo, hoping nobody notices you're uncomfortable. Maybe you grew up in a house where nobody really listened to you unless you raised your voice. Maybe you learned to stay small because staying small kept you out of trouble. I know that story because I lived that story. I know how heavy it feels to walk through the world wondering if you'll ever feel big enough to take up the space you're standing on. But I'm telling you now, you don't have to wait for permission to be more than you've been. When I first started putting this stuff into practice, it felt awkward as hell. I'd try to stand taller and my shoulders would ache because they weren't used to being back like that. I'd hold eye contact and my brain would scream, "Look away, look away!" I'd tell myself to speak up and my voice would crack because it wasn't used to carrying weight. But each time I did it, I got a little steadier. Each time I felt the tremble in my hands, I did it anyway. And over time, those little actions turned into habits. One day you look around and realize you're not pretending anymore. You really do feel like you belong here. You really do believe your words matter. You really do stand like someone worth listening to. And when that happens, the world adjusts around you. Folks start treating you like you've got something to say because they can feel you believe it too. I've seen people who barely spoke above a whisper stand up and command a room just by shifting their posture and taking their time with their words. I've watched folks who thought they'd never be noticed walk into a meeting and hold the floor because they learned to pause instead of ramble. I've watched the shyest people say no for the first time in their life and see the shock on someone's face when they realize, oh, they mean it this time. These secrets work because they tap into something universal. Human nature don't care where you're from or what you've done before. We're wired to respond to presence, to quiet confidence, to small signs that say, I respect myself, so you might want to do the same. And the beautiful part is you don't have to be perfect at it. You don't have to flip every switch overnight. You just have to pick one thing and start practicing it until it's yours. Maybe for you, it's finally looking people in the eye when you talk. Maybe it's slowing down your voice when your heart wants to race ahead. Maybe it's standing still when someone tries to bulldoze you. Maybe it's learning to say no without adding a 5-minute apology to soften the blow. Maybe it's sitting up front instead of hiding in the back. Maybe it's uncrossing your arms and planting your feet on the ground like you have a right to be there. Because you do. I know someone reading this is sitting there thinking, that's easy for you to say. You don't know my life. And you're right, I don't know every detail of your life. But I know this, you've got something in you that wants to be seen, or you wouldn't even be here listening to these words. And that's the part of you that's strong enough to do it. That's the part of you that will stand up one day, make a small change, and watch the world tilt just a little bit in your favor. These secrets don't belong to me. They belong to anybody brave enough to try them. Anybody who's tired of feeling like the extra in someone else's story. Anybody who's done letting life pass by while they sit in the corner hoping someone will invite them to the table. This is how you pull out your own chair and sit down like you were meant to be there all along. And once you do, you'll wonder why you ever waited for an invitation in the first place.